You are tuned in to the Week in Review, presented by the Prosper Group, where the right turns to win online.
Join us each week as we take a look at what is happening in digital advocacy and politics with a right-of-center focus.
Hello and welcome back. It's been another great week, and I'd like to welcome you to the Prosper Group Week in Review podcast. Each week, we cover politics and digital from right of center for campaign professionals, political insiders, elected officials, and candidates for office. I'm your host from the Prosper Group, Dan Huber. On today's show, we'll discuss establishing digital reporting, your weekly social tracking powered by social listening from the Prosper Group, and we're going to talk a little further about political social listening. We're going to kick things off this week with the weekly digital tip. Last week, we talked about digital planning for the holiday season, and this week we're talking about establishing digital reporting. We always say what gets measured gets done, and you want to set up reporting for your digital within the organization, whether you're an elected official, you're looking at your elected office, whether you're a candidate or a campaign. You want to determine your KPIs, track them, and share them within your organization to the key people that need to be aware of what's going on to demonstrate what you're achieving. You want to set up a regular cadence for that reporting. It may be weekly, it may be bi-weekly, monthly, depending on the size of the campaign and depending on the investment that you have, it could be substantially different. If you're a very large campaign or you're coming up on election day, major fundraising deadlines, you may have some KPIs that you want to report daily, particularly when it comes to fundraising. And, when we get close to GOTV, if you have KPIs that you're tracking related to that, maybe it's filling volunteer shifts. Those are things that you may want to report out on daily, but there's probably also people who have direct insight into that too. So the important thing is track what's key, what's important to your campaign, and you can help determine what you should track with your digital team. They'll help you determine what you should be paying attention to, and that's going to vary greatly depending on the size and scope of the operation. If you have a decent digital team, they actually can probably do a lot of it for you, or at least give you a big chunk of it that you can just add in your own little pieces to at the end. But you really want to be intentional about your reporting. Make sure you're measuring what's meaningful to the campaign and your goals. Are you building your house file? If so, new subscribers are going to be much more important than site visits. Doesn't matter if 1 million people visit your website or 40 people visit your website. Either way, if you get 20 or 40 subscribers, that's the important KPI. That's the important metric you want to pay attention to. And along with that, do you have a cost per acquisition? Are you investing in ads? Are you doing revenue shares to try and get people in the door? And so that's important to be thinking about. Also, do you have any testing you need to report? So that should go into your reporting as well. Really good reporting should include your most recent period. So I always think about what's the big picture as well as what happened right now. So pay attention to over the past week. I do a lot of weekly reports. That's usually a pretty common cadence. Over the last week, we've accomplished X. And oftentimes I'll say week over week, that's either a percentage increase or decrease from the previous week. And also on a lot of these metrics, you want to put them into the context of a bigger picture. So what have we done since the beginning of the cycle? What have we done since the beginning of the year? Really trying to provide some sort of context for the information you're reporting on, because, what sounds like a good number may be a great number if you're running for state legislature, but if you're running for a governor of a state, it may not be a great number. So it all has to be within the context of who you are as an elected official, who you are as a campaign, and what's going on, what your spend is, because a lot of it's really what is the ROI coming back to the campaign. While you may not be able to each week, measure that directly depending on what resources you have available and what your measures are. That's really what you want to be paying attention to. So that's something to really pay attention to. The other thing that I would say that I think adds value when you're talking about that bigger picture is include a graph of where you've been over a certain amount of time. So, depending on whether you're using a tool like Excel or Google Sheets to track that information, or you have a more sophisticated dashboard tool that is pulling in data automatically, there's different ways to really track that over time and to pull it into your data and then graph it out with a tool like Excel, or some of the reporting dashboards even have their own graphic interfaces built in. So that's something to think about too. The other thing that I would just say is, do expect variation within your reporting from week to week. There's going to be good weeks, there's going to be bad weeks. You want to look at overall trends to see where you're going. And I think that says a lot about the success of where your digital is. So, that's something to be thinking about. And, also considering seasonability. Is it the holiday season? Are you kind of stepping back your fundraising efforts or pushing them up? Have you decided that over the next couple of months, because, maybe you work in the state legislature, maybe you're an elected official in a state where you're not allowed to campaign during legislative months. So you have to turn off your fundraising during that time, or you have to turn off your house file building activities. Obviously, those are things that you need to take into consideration as you approach that. So, I would just say, I think there's a lot of value in putting together quality reporting for your campaigns, your digital, and really that any aspect of your campaign that you do, you should have some level of reporting. Digital gives us the opportunity to get really strong metrics in near real time for a lot of these things. So that's important. But the key is measure what's important to the campaign. Sometimes I think we pay too much attention to social media followers and website visitors more than we should. Are we achieving our goals of building the house file? Are we achieving our goal of raising money through digital? Those are the numbers you really want to be looking at, because while some of these other numbers can contribute to that, you want to be investing your digital efforts and your digital resources in the efforts that are going to deliver for your goals in the end. So keep that in mind. All right, well, next up, we're going to look at the weekly social listing update. Every weekday, PG sends out the AM rundown powered by social listing from the Prosper Group. If you're interested in receiving the AM rundown, you can go to prospergroupcorp.com/AM rundown and sign up for the list there. Every day it includes a social summary, social trends in politics, and a digital best practice for you to look at. The conversations we've been tracking in this area are some longer term sticky conversations, as well as some current events. And we're going to start with some of those sticky topics that have been sticking around for a while and probably will. So the first one, and we've been following this for a while, is the filibuster. That conversation's dropped 55% this week to about 109,000 mentions in Twitter. So that's a pretty big drop. I think we're going to continue to see, some consistent conversation around this with some votes that are coming up in the next few weeks. And there continues to be that push from the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, to really do away with the filibuster. So we're going to continue to watch that. Border crisis conversations down another 19% this week. That's kind of gotten a little quiet. And I think part of that just is the bigger picture, as there's a lot of complications going on right now for the administration, that it's kind of become less focused on, just because there's other things that are taking up the same air in the media conversation right now. The third and final sticky topic that we've been following for a while is gas prices. Gas prices shot up 7.7 cents this past week to $3.26.7 on average across the United States. It's another high this year and a high that dates back to 2014. So that's the conversation that we saw around gas prices is up 20% this week. And that shouldn't be a surprise with a big jump in the cost of gas like that. Well, looking at some of the more current events that we've been tracking in our social listening, the first one that we've been paying attention to and we've been following for a little while is the debt ceiling. That conversation's dropped 64% this week, week over week. And I think it's going to continue to stay out there for a little bit, but it certainly ebbs and flows based on what's going on in Congress. So it's down this week. What is up this week is a new topic that we're following in current events, and that's McAuliffe or Youngkin. So as most of you know, the Virginia's governor's race is coming up here in a couple weeks. And it's seen as kind of a bellwether for the 2022 midterm elections. It's very close. There's some polling that shows that Youngkin, the Republican, has pulled ahead of McAuliffe, and McAuliffe's been governor before, so he has a lot of name recognition. It's an interesting race to watch. That conversation this past week has gone up 133% week over week. And we saw about 241,000 tweets in that conversation. So it's a pretty big conversation that a lot of people are focused on. And it's something that we're going to pay attention to at least through the November 2nd election. So we're paying attention to that. The other one we called back last week, and we're looking at it again because more actions occurred. So the Texas abortion conversation actually dropped 51% this week. Last week, the news was that a federal judge had put a stay in to the Texas Heartbeat Act, but the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals this past week reinstated the Texas Heartbeat Act. So some action there, but it continues to be in the news. I'm guessing it may drop off the radar this coming week, but that's pending any major conversation that goes on, and who knows what the Justice Department may do. So that's what's going on in social listening, brought to you by the AM Rundown from the Prosper Group. Check back each week for tracking and analysis of the social conversations around the important topics of the day. And as I mentioned before, if you want to sign up to receive the AM Rundown, you can go to prospergroupcorp.com/AM Rundown and get those in your inbox every day. We've heard a lot of positive feedback about those emails, so check it out. All right, well, for today's final segment, we're going to talk about social listening for elected officials, political campaigns, and candidates. So obviously, we just talked about some of the high-level social listening that we do every week, but it's really, social listening is something that people can put to use at multiple levels. And social monitoring, social listening, these are two very common terms that we use for this area. Politics is really just starting to catch up to business in the social monitoring, social listening area. Business tends to be the leader in some of these digital movements, and politics finds new and different ways to incorporate it into how they're doing things. And part of that, I think, kind of goes to the sort of startup mentality that goes with a lot of political campaigns. And then, once you get elected as elected officials, some offices may not be as aggressive in incorporating new techniques and tactics as others, but it's always important to stay and pay attention to what's going on there. So we're going to talk a little bit today about social listening for elected officials, political campaigns, and candidates. Several benefits to social listening. You can enhance your engagement. You can track topics that are both positive and negative, kind of what we see in our weekly social listening updates. But you can also tie that directly to, a state or a specific city, as well as potentially a specific person that's being mentioned in the conversation. So how is coronavirus tied with Biden doing. Those are things that you can look at and consider. Understand the conversation. If something's negative, you can understand what's being said, and you can prepare how to respond or not respond based on some information you're seeing, because you can get a feeling for how prevalent is this conversation. Are people truly invested? Is it just a handful of people that are saying a bunch of stuff that nobody's paying attention to? And you can dig into the people who are talking about this. What is their actual reach? If you have somebody that is complaining about how you responded as an elected official to the coronavirus, and they have 10 followers and have sent 10 tweets, well, that's really just kind of swatting flies. If you have somebody that has 100,000 followers and has sent 500 tweets and has a very strong circle of influence, you might think a little differently about that conversation. And that conversation is probably going to grow much more organically depending on the credence of the people who are saying that. So social listening and social monitoring can really help you understand that conversation, what's going on. It can also help you identify influencers. So again, if somebody that has a following of 100,000 people has something to say, that has a much greater impact than somebody who has 100 followers. For a lot of campaigns and a lot of media, somebody who has probably 5,000 to 50,000 followers has a pretty significant impact and circle of influence if they're engaged in what's going on in current events. So those are people to pay attention to. And, not just from a negative side, but from a positive side, if there's somebody paying attention to your race, what you're doing, somebody paying attention to your city or your campaign or your elected office, those are people that you might want to reach out to, much like you would to the press, and say, hey, let's talk about this, or at least engage them online. If it's somebody that's creating substantive content, those might be people you would want to reach out and say, hey, can we talk about this? And, maybe there's an opportunity to get some content read or created that could be beneficial to you, to your office, to your campaign. And I touched on this a little bit. Social monitoring, social listening will help you to better understand your audience and what they care about. This kind of goes into, if you have some high order tools, you can actually get a sense of, A, who's talking about the issues that are important to you. And then if you really have tools and people who understand what's going on, you might be able to get a broader picture of what other things are those specific people talking about, and maybe better understand what's important to them. So, I think that's something to think about. When we talk about social monitoring and social listening, there's various different tools out there that really have some different purposes and do some different things. There are some challenges about social monitoring and social listening, especially when you start trying to put artificial intelligence into the analysis and insights, which some companies do. And I think probably the most important point that we like to talk about is that artificial intelligence usually does not understand sarcasm and how to respond to that. So, what could be perceived as positive or negative might be just the opposite, negative or positive. And so usually if you have a kind of summary insights approach to what you're doing in social monitoring, you want people with experience to actually dig into what's going on out there to help you understand and interpret that information. So, I did mention that there's multiple tools that are out there. Not all social monitoring is created equal. There's some really great end user or, tools for brands, and in this case, campaigns that can listen to what's being said and interact and monitor and respond in a way that allows them to engage with people. And that's really great if you want to run that sort of approach, but you have to be committed to, if you're going to engage. I always think it's dangerous to initially commit to something that you're not committed to long term and then back off. You should pick what social channels you're going to be active in, and really establish what your level of engagement is and try and maintain that over time. So what I would recommend not doing is investing in an engagement strategy that you go all in on and then over time decide, oh, I don't know that I want to do this as a long-term solution, which particularly for campaigns, I think having organic responses and engagement is really good. I probably wouldn't encourage campaigns to have 2 or 3 full-time staffers to just monitor or respond to conversations that are going on out there. But for big brands, that's not an uncommon thing. If you're a retail brand like sporting goods, companies like Verizon's, T-Mobile, AT&T, they have brand managers that their focus is just monitoring what's going on social media, engaging people, and trying to make sure that they're happy with the end product there, which probably a little less realistic, a little less feasible for elected and officials and campaigns to take that approach, but not bad to be aware of what's going on out there. So on the flip side, there's some really good tools for gaining insights and doing research. And that's really where the Prosper Group and our social listening focuses and adds a lot of value. We can help with some of those other things if people need it, but again, that's not always the best use of campaign time. And what the higher order tools help you do is, gain insights by measuring kind of like the overall conversation related to your issues, understanding the size, the scope, the stickiness of conversations. We see some issues that appear super quick and disappear just as fast. So they go from 0 to 100, and then pretty much, they have like a really fast trail off, and then they just kind of disappear. Whereas we see other conversations, and this is kind of the sticky conversations we talk about, that they emerge on the scene and really like continue to stay out there over time. So obviously a very relevant conversation in today's world is coronavirus, COVID-19. So, that's an issue, a topic in social media that's been prevalent consistently for a long time. And it'll take, obviously there's a lot of things that have to be addressed in the world between now and then, but it'll be a long time before that, fades out of the social conversation in a pretty permanent sort of way. It's just kind of become a very commonplace thing. Whereas, there's other conversations we see, and, you particularly see this with anything that goes viral, where you see a very rapid rise and generally a quick drop off, and maybe the occasional, spike because something happens related to it, and then a drop off again. So as elected officials, as politicians, the relevance of that is, if there's an issue that comes up in a news story that could be troubling or concerning, or, could be positive, we can see, okay, here's how that's coming and arising. And is it something that looks like it's going to go away quickly? And if it's something we don't want it to, what can we do to continue to promote that conversation so that it has legs for a little bit longer? And on the flip side, if there's some sort of crisis or concern and there's a quick blip, we can look at that and see, does this have staying power that it's going to continue to, come over time? Or is this something that there's kind of this instant outrage and then it kind of, fizzles away quickly? So we can get a sense of that by paying attention to the conversation and, getting a sense of what's lingering out there. So, social listening does provide some real value, particularly for conversations that rise to a substantive level within, the broader conversation. So again, like many other things, the value of this probably depends on the size and scope of your elected office, of your campaign, of your candidate. And, if you're someone who regularly sees headlines, regularly is in the news, this could be a very powerful tool to get a sense of what's going on out there. If you're someone that doesn't see a ton of earned media, doesn't see a lot of social activity related to your campaign, your elected office, your candidate, then, probably it's something that you would focus on a little bit less. But my point to that is you really do need a sort of critical mass to put this to work for you from kind of a high level intelligence insights. But the other thing that I would say is you can take a broader conversation. There are national topics that are going on that may be relevant to you, and you can get some insights from what's going on in the broader conversation that you can localize to you, to your elected office. And that's of value. But, maybe not something specifically related to your local area, to your candidate. So something to think about there. If you're interested in learning more about social listening, social monitoring, and how you can put that to work for your elected official, your campaign, your candidate, talk to a PG strategist. We're always here to help and talk. Our strategists, their job is to talk to you and to help you better understand the challenges that exist out there and help you find solutions to address that. So think about that and consider it. And that brings us to the end of the show. Appreciate you taking the time to sit down, to download, to listen to the show, the Prosper Group Week in Review. We produce and publish every Friday, so please subscribe.
You can find our Prosper
Enjoy
Group
your
Week in
weekend
Review
and
podcast on
download
Apple
the show
Podcasts,
again next week.
Spotify, and Google Podcasts.
If you like the show, please subscribe and share.